Hey y'all, my name is Morgana and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if this is your first time watching me. This is another edition of my What If series where I take characters from one of my other series, so far only the Ultimate Decades Challenge, and kind of make a different timeline where we go, well, what if this happened? So in this timeline, what if, still taking place in the 1300s, Robert and Alice did end up marrying. What would their kids be like? And what would that happen? And, how would that happen? So for those of you who don't know, Alice is our current matriarch of the Smith family in my Ultimate Decades Challenge. And while she and Robert were kind of childhood friends and almost childhood crushes, they were never able to get together. And those of you who watch the series know exactly why, and all the drama that came with Alice's life and family and all that. But for those of you who don't know, here is a really, really quick recap. Alice and Robert were both born to pretty poor farmer families, and they formed a friendship when they were children. The famine of 1317 hit. The famine hit, and while Robert did lose his mother and baby brother, Alice lost literally her entire family. Her father had passed a little bit before, and then her sister passed, and then finally her mother and two brothers passed, leaving her completely alone. And she ended up having to go live with her best friend / older sister figure, Mary, who at that point had gotten married to a wealthy wine merchant in the village. Robert, on the other hand, ended up having to marry some random woman in Windenburg and moved out of the village, and they expected to just quite literally never ever see each other again, and that was going to just be the end of that. But thankfully and luckily, things kind of sort of worked out for both of them. With Mary's newfound, money and influence through her marriage, she was able to secure a well-off man for Alice to marry named Nawaf, who Alice absolutely adored and loved. They had an amazing relationship, and around this time, well, slightly before, Robert had divorced his first wife, came back to the village, and ended up marrying a different woman. So no matter what, it's just the cards never really seemed to be in the play for them, and they both just kind of ended up going their separate ways. Robert spent literal years just almost stalking Alice and just being kind of creepy, showing up to the farm. Alice was always busy because she had kids, she had, mouths to feed, she had a farm to take care of, she had, animals to take care of, and she kept losing her husbands. In the most recent episode, she just got married to husband number 3, but Nawaf and Jacques, her first 2 husbands, died very untimely deaths, which left her with very young children to kind of juggle. Obviously with the help of Mary, but there was absolutely no room for Robert, especially him being a married man with children of his own. In the most recent episode, if you watched it, you know what happened. He and Robert and Alice kind of, not rekindled their love or anything like that, but spoke for the first time in years and came to an understanding and an agreement. So now Robert is probably going to be back in Alice's life. We see him frequently anyways, but I imagine we'll be seeing him a bit more frequently somehow. So, but yeah, that's what happened. So we made a few new Sims and to see what they would look like if they had children, 2 boys and 2 girls. Obviously all of their children would have been peasants in this time period, because if she had married him, he, would still technically is a peasant. He's just like a rather well-off one, I suppose, but they would both be very, very poor peasants. The circumstances that got them their money and slight influence they have now is forces outside of them, to put it lightly. So their first daughter, not the one on screen currently, I think. I don't know. I actually don't know how long this is going to take for me to voice over. But the first daughter, I kind of see her as like almost a 1300 version of a hippie. I figure she'd be the one in the family to focus on, you know, gardening, herbalism, and kind of making sure her family stayed healthy. So she would be helping her mom out with a lot of the cooking and, you know, herbalism, kind of medicine making, quote unquote. That would be her role. I think she's very, very pretty. I could definitely see her getting married, but I could also see her not getting married, and kind of working at the local orphanage, or, you know, hospitals didn't exist, but just kind of going around, maybe even being a midwife. She would definitely be a good midwife. None of these kids are named also because they don't exist and I didn't save them. So sorry if you wanted them on the gallery. They don't exist anymore, actually. The second one, the second daughter, she got the stone-hearted and humble traits, which is really interesting because Alice's eldest son in My Ultimate Decade Challenge also has a stone-hearted trait, and it's led to a lot of difficult familial relationships between him and his siblings and anybody else around him. But I kind of see the second daughter as being a bit of a wannabe social climber. Like, she doesn't care if the man she has to marry is old, young, as long as he's more rich than them, which in this time period wouldn't be a difficult thing to be. She is willing to take it, even if she has to like nanny for the Lord's kids or like be a personal midwife to a well-off middle-class person, like a merchant family or something like that. Like, she is completely willing. She's willing to humble herself, put herself down a little bit more just to be a little further up in society. And because she's stone-hearted, she probably is also completely willing to kind of put down the people around her, you know, step on whoever's head she's got to step on in order to get into a better position. And if that means getting rid of somebody's wife so that she could take their position, I don't think that she'd be above it. If we're going based on Amir, she would absolutely not be above doing any of that. The first son, he got the homebody trait and also the straight edge trait, which are normally traits I would not use for this challenge because, you know, they're not doing crack in 1300s, you know what I mean? So, well, no, the opium stuff didn't happen till way later, right? Yeah, I don't know. He's not doing anything that could unsober him, right? Including drinking. He's not into going to the tavern, drinking ale or anything like that. But I say that he's a homebody. I would take that straight edge as him being anti-occult, which is very unlike Alice and Robert. In the real timeline, Robert's married to an alien, and Alice is literal best friends with her older sister figure. Mary is a witch, and they rely on Mary's powers pretty frequently. Neither one of them are anti-occult, so I don't know where he would get this from or what happened to kind of terrify him to be anti-occult like this. But he's strict, he's a rule follower. Like, whenever his siblings and him would do something like pour paint on the ground or like forget to get the eggs from the chicken or forget to milk the cow, he's definitely the type to tattle. He's definitely like a strict rule follower, so I don't think that any of his siblings would rely on him for anything because they know that, like, especially if it involves a form of rule being broken, even if it's something small. They also probably wouldn't come to him if they came across something occult-like. He would definitely be part of the crew. Like, if the village were to be split between people who accepted occults or just did not care enough about them to like do anything drastic, he would 100% be part of the group that's like, I think this person has magic, burn them, you know? He definitely has good intentions, but a terrible execution. Well, good intentions as long as you're not in a cult, I suppose, right? But he's still a homebody, so, you know, he would mostly be on the farm. The people in the village probably wouldn't know him very well. He doesn't go to the tavern. You probably wouldn't see him much unless you caught him foraging or hunting or anything like that, or working his farm, or going to, you know, church, going to worship the Watcher or anything like that. He's just, you know, regular dude. Now the second son, he got the smug and moody traits, which I think is really interesting. So he's definitely trying to be like big man in the village. He's not necessarily noble or anything like that or educated, but out of the peasant boys, he's probably considered to be like one of the most handsome of the peasant boys in their village. And you know, that kind of got to his head. He's kind of throws like big tantrums if he doesn't get what he wants. And ultimately like a big fish, small pond situation. Like, okay, you might be the most popular, the most handsome of the peasants, but when it gets to the nobles, you know, no one bats an eye at him. And it's also because Henford on Bagley is so small. I'm sure if he was a peasant in a much, much bigger town, like Windenburg, he'd just be a guy. So I absolutely have no clue, like, what that means for him, like the types of girls he would get. He's definitely flirtatious. It's also interesting that he's the only one out of all his siblings to not get his parents' black hair. He got like this light brown type of situation going, which could be from his grandmother. Robert's biological mother was a black woman who had like a blonde afro. So maybe some type of recessive genetic something happened down the line. But yeah, these are the kiddos. They are all together pretty good looking, you know, which I kind of knew. Like when Robert grew up and Alice grew up, I was like, they would definitely make some pretty good looking kids, and I wasn't wrong. Personally, I think that the first daughter is my favorite. I think that all of them have pretty interesting storylines, specifically the second daughter and the first son, because between the two of them, it would just, you know, the second son, personality wise, my least favorite, but I definitely could see him getting into some drama. And the first daughter, I just think she's sweet. Like if something were to happen to her, like she died or anything like that, I don't know. The second daughter, she definitely wants to get married. If she doesn't get married, because she is a social climber, the next best thing for her to do would probably be to become a nun, like work at a nunnery, or you know, be a nanny to a well-off family. So she, you know, she'd get to live there and all that. First son, I could definitely see him getting married. I don't know if his wife would be very happy with him, but he'd get married for sure. I just think he'd be a very typical boring man of this time period, not gonna lie. Hate that for him, but that probably would have been his reality if he got married. If he didn't, he'd just be a regular serf, probably live in a small village somewhere with a bunch of other single men and just work till he died, I guess. I don't know. The second son, 100% could see him getting married, but he would also be a womanizer, so I could also see him kind of cheating on his wife a little bit, or a lot. I could see some children out of wedlock even before marriage, or if he decided not to get married, I could see about 3 or 4 little second sons walking around the village, you know, maybe beknownst or unbeknownst to him, who knows. With all that said and done, I hope you enjoyed this episode of What If. You know, I am really glad to have Robert back into the main storyline. He's been creeping for a while now. Creeping with a purpose, but creeping nonetheless. Hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye!